You have a brain running on fats and a brain running on glucose. What's the difference? The fat-fueled brain has more stable energy, sustained focus, and mental clarity. The carb-fueled brain can acutely be sharper, react faster, and perform more intensely. This is great for high-intensity, short tasks, but comes with greater energy fluctuations and energy crashes, higher inflammation, higher overexcitation, and oxidative stress, which are linked to neurodegeneration. An efficient brain is the one that's able to tap into fats for fuel. We call it metabolically flexible brain. This leads to higher efficiency in energy production, which may lower things like inflammation, oxidative stress, hyperexcitation, and lead to more consistent focus and mental clarity. Note that when talking about fat-fueled brain, we're not necessarily thinking about going keto, but training metabolic flexibility either through calorie restriction, intermittent fasting, or other ways to lower carbohydrates. Not necessarily a brain who consistently runs on fats predominantly, but a brain that knows how to switch from glucose to fats.
The reason I like fasting so much is it makes the brain feel clean. There is higher alertness and mental clarity that comes from cleaning toxins from your brain, particularly if you have enough stable energy. That can come from fats, like a ketogenic meal that doesn't spike glucose in the morning. This raises alertness and gets you a step closer to being a brainiac.
How does fasting or keto work in the brain? The brain typically runs on glucose. Most of its work is powered by carbohydrates. Now, when we strip glucose off by lowering it, the brain mobilizes fat for fuel. In deep ketosis, the levels of these ketones, BHB or acetoacetate, increase, making ketones the predominant source of energy, which contribute up to 50 to 70% of total brain's energy. They cross the blood-brain barrier via MCT transporters, and these MCT transporters essentially help pulling ketones, pulling fats faster when glucose is low. As ketones enter into the brain, into neurons, they assist in the energy creation process. Essentially, ketones are turned into acetyl coenzyme A and then help create energy in a way that increases NAD+ to NADH ratio. While it might sound technical, this is just a nerd talk for your brain being more effective and efficient at energy creation whilst creating less metabolic strain, less oxidative stress, and less inflammation. Because ketones are a little bit more efficient than glucose in yielding ATP relative to the amount of oxygen used, meaning at even a lower amount of oxygen, when we're fueled on ketones, we can make more ATP molecules. This makes ketones especially valuable during higher stress conditions like fatigue, sleep deprivation, or mental overload. And they also provide a more steadier supply of energy, which correlates to steadier focus, mental clarity, and alertness that's not as fluctuating, intensely high and sharply drops low, but it's more like steady state, consistent focus, and consistent energy supply. Fasting or keto don't starve the brain unless you go on a heavy calorie deficit, but they make it metabolically flexible, meaning they increase its ability for him to tap into fats for fuel, which can be a good thing.
If you're unsure whether caffeine disrupts your sleep, you can check it out now here for free. Just input your caffeinated drinks you had, the time when you had them, and how many of them. Then input your bedtime and how sensitive to caffeine you are. Based on half-life estimates, total caffeine load, and your sensitivity to it, our system gives you a result of the active caffeine at bedtime and how sleep disruptive it is. There you go. Visit vitalsend.com/tools for full access.
Ketones and cognitive performance. Many people report feeling more alert, mentally clear, or being able to sustain focus for longer when on a ketogenic diet. Why is that? Well, first thing, you're not as sleepy because when you eat a ton of glucose and let's say you had a big bowl of rice, your blood sugar spikes and then drops. that leads to an energy crash and you're essentially fatigued and sleepy. When you go on ketones or low carb, that's not there anymore. There is less of these fluctuations. Mechanistically and metabolically, there are ways to explain why going more on fats and lower on carbs / using ketones for brain energy can help the brain function better. First of all, it reduces this overexcitation and stabilizes synaptic signaling, how neurons communicate between each other. That is stabilized, and all of this leads to a steadier flow and supply of energy, but also steadier things like focus, mood, mental clarity, because there aren't so sharp highs and sharp drops, lows. But in all honesty, nutritional ketosis, when you go to scanned research, doesn't really show strong, potent, acute benefits in young people without compromised cognition. Acutely doesn't have a very potent effect in making you way more focused, sharper, or react quicker. Matter of fact, a lot of those things that are easier to measure short term are actually where glucose is superior. And that's fast thinking, fast problem solving, faster reaction time, sharper memory. All of these things that are easily measurable is where glucose is superior. Now, when we talk about older adults or in brains that have compromised energy metabolism, like under low oxygen or after sleep deprivation, there is something to be said about fats as a supportive alternative fat fuel, improving cognitive function. But again, in healthy adults with good cognitive function, it's harder to measure things like being a little bit more alert. But my take on this is that the lower metabolic strain that the brain gets when it can use an alternative source of fuel like fat is long-term accumulating less damage in the brain and makes it more, not just neuroplastic, but makes it younger, makes it, less damaged over the ages. Now, if we look at science, there is an RCT in moderate cognitively impaired people. At 6 months, they gave participants a ketogenic drink with MCT. Guess what happened? Well, the results show improved memory recall and improved verbal fluency and attention. There's a ton of evidence on moderate cognitive impairment in keto, and we'll discuss why, but the TLDR is the aging brain is less glucose sensitive, and tapping into fats unlocks this whole new mental energy that can be used to focus, to memorize, etc. Another study looking at high stress conditions like sleep deprivation shows that keto may aid cognition. In a 14-day trial, they compared isocaloric, meaning same calorie, high carb versus low carb diet in military personnel. After extended 36-hour fasting, the keto group improved psychomotor vigilance. This one surprised me as well. The scores showed improved reaction time, memory, vigor, and less fatigue and less sleepiness. Another study looking at 3 consecutive weeks of nutritional ketosis in adults, in healthy adults, actually showed no significant improvements in cognitive performance. In hypoxic condition, so in hypoxia challenge under low oxygen, this is like altitude training or simulated altitude training, ketone monoesters attenuated declines in cognitive performance, meaning if they were at low oxygen and their cognition typically drops, when they had ketone monoester, it didn't drop as much, but it stood flat for longer. Conclusion? Shifting into ketones or fats as brain fuel can be quite effective for moderate cognitive impairment, those with impaired glucose metabolism, or under high stress conditions like stress, low oxygen, or sleep deprivation. However, the same keto or fasting may not be acutely as potent in improving cognition in healthy, uncompromised adults. Now here's how ketones work to make the brain more energy efficient. Neurons convert ketones into acetyl-CoA. This boosts the NAD+ to NADH ratio, supporting a cleaner energy balance or energy creation at a lower metabolic strain with less byproducts. Ketones generate more ATP relative to oxygen use if you compare it to glucose. Less oxygen demand means our brain can function better under highly stressed situations because we can create more energy, cleaner energy, at a lower oxygen amount. That also results in creating fewer free radicals, which can help reduce oxidative stress and inflammation, which greatly contribute to aging, brain shrinkage, your brain rusting, and neurodegeneration. So, in a way, the workload and metabolic strain on the brain is slightly reduced. This can make sure the high demand areas like the hippocampus are still active and working and support its function, providing a steadier supply of energy that lasts for longer. Net effect: ketones make energy creation more efficient in the brain. If your brain feels cooked by noon, 3 coffees, 20 tabs open, racing thoughts, you don't need more stimulants. You need to fix the energy system that's powering up your brain. My 9-step focus reset protocol covers creatine, keto breakfast, smart stimulants, caffeine cycling, 90-20 work blocks, air quality, NSDR, glutamate control, and some evidence-backed nootropics. Just the things that work and nothing that doesn't. 100% free. If you want to be a brainiac and unlock your brain power, go and visit 4protocols.com/focus. Lastly, neuroprotection and brain health. How are they tied to ketone use? Well, as we've said, the aging brain becomes less sensitive to glucose. That impairs energy creation. Fats or ketones step in as alternative source of fuel for the brain. So for glucose-insensitive brains who have compromised cognition because of insufficient energy, they essentially tap into fats for fuel and maintain their cognitive engines to run smoothly. Studies show improved memory, alertness, and focus in older people typically with moderate cognitive impairment. Now, the reasons behind these are the same: lower metabolic strain, lower oxidative stress and damage, and higher use of and creation of energy by using an alternative source of fuel. But what ketones can also do, which ties to the first point of lowering the cumulative damage on the brain, is they may shift the glutamate excitatory neurotransmitter to GABA inhibitor neurotransmitter, higher in terms of GABA and lower in terms of glutamate. This essentially reduces how high neurons fire, sort of stabilizing this too fast and high firing. We may offset some of the damage that comes with it. So a fat-fueled brain may essentially be better at stabilizing neural excitability, so firing of the brain so it's not too high. This balance may support focus, attention, learning, and memory. Now the science here is quite strong. We can look at Fortier 2021, 6 months RCT tested twice daily ketogenic MCT containing drink, which had 15 grams of MCT in adults with moderate cognitive impairment. The group that had the MCT supplement had significant improvements in episodic memory, executive function, processing speed, and language. All of those correlated with higher circulating levels of ketones and higher ketone availability in the brain. Another RCT from Phillips 2021, lasting for 12 weeks in patients with Alzheimer's, showed that the ketogenic group improved daily function and quality of life. Cognition tended to trend upward in line with other studies showing lower oxidative stress and stabilized neural excitability. Takeaway is stripping glucose off from time to time and practicing intermittently low-carb, keto, fasting, or even calorie restriction can make your brain more metabolically flexible, which makes it more efficient to tap into fat for fuel. When this happens, particularly under stressed conditions like low oxygen, poor sleep, or high stress, the brain may become more efficient at creating energy, and this results in improved cognitive function, which is typically seen under stress conditions or in people with Alzheimer's or moderate cognitive impairment. Now, which fats exactly supercharge your brain and are the most effective to raise ketone levels in the brain and shift to ketosis the fastest is what we're exploring in the next video. We're comparing C8, MCT oil, all-carb, CLA, and also exogenous ketones. Go have fun with it. You never know. You might become a genius after all.